welcome to Startup to Success with Maria. I have a very special guest today, Dr. Melanie Keller ND, who is also known as the Intuitive Edge Doctor, because she helps people understand their bodies, lives, and businesses better so they can receive the curated care they need. After having gut health problems over her life, Dr. Melanie uses her naturopathic expertise and epigenetic intuition to get results. She has been featured in Insider, Men's Health, Eat This, Not That, Well+Good, and ABC's The List TV. Dr. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Oh my God, I am so thrilled about what we're going to be talking about today. I can't wait to dive in. But before we begin, I would love to learn about the inspiration. What was your journey like for you to be here today and do this amazing work that you do?
Well, my journey starts out in rural Alaska. It actually started out in what we call the lower 48. So my parents were transferred a lot with my dad in the government. So I got exposure to, let's say, the malls and street lights and et cetera. And then at 6 years old, all of a sudden I was in rural Alaska, and we're talking no streetlights, no fast food, 22 people in my high school graduating class.
Oh, wow.
It was 4 hours by boat to the nearest movie theater or 4 hours by car to Canada. So needless to say, I was raised where food had to come to us. You know, I wanted grapes and they might be $8 a pound. And my mom would say, no, we're not getting grapes. But at the same time, my family was commercial fishing. So I was raised on salmon. I was actually commercial fishing crew for a few years. That's what I did to make money. And even getting water from the mountain, spring, etc. I had this pristine life that, of course, I wanted to fly the coop from when I turned 18. But looking back, it was ideal. And in fact, my family is in dentistry, so I never had too much sugar. I mean, it was like, yet I struggled with weight as a child. And it was very, quite frankly, difficult because I was doing everything right. And when I look back at my mom, because it put a lot of pressure on me, but I look back on my mom and it's like, she was doing everything right. I mean, I was in 4th grade going to aerobics with her. Wow. You know, and so I can understand how she was like, what do we need to do or change? And I had horrible gut health problems. In fact, at one point in my teenage years, my mom asked me when was the last time I had a bowel movement, and I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, I don't know, maybe a month ago. Wow. And she just flipped out, was like, are you kidding me? And, you know, of course, took all this action, and it was always in a naturopathic way. We had to fly things up, fiber and, you know, all these supplements, and all of it made it worse. And so I really struggled with that. In fact, of all of the things that I did, whether it was weight loss or constipation remedies, it seemingly made things worse. And that's just, again, like I say, it weighs on your psyche when you're just like, what's wrong with me? And it wasn't until I was in medical school and my mentor was talking about this condition called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which can cause a lot of, I'll just say, bloating. That's the predominant one that a lot of women will just be like, oh, you know, raise their hand and can relate. But it also can affect your motility, your gut motility. So that can turn into diarrhea, and it can also turn into constipation. So it can go too fast or too slow if people need to think of it in those terms. So when I recognized, because this is a new condition, I mean, it was like newly being talked about as the time of me being in med school, I was like, I've got that. That's me. And because of all of these other things that we've been doing in naturopathic medical school, more fiber, et cetera, it was a lot of similar things also were making things worse. So I won a lottery, literally won a lottery to do mentorship with this professor. And I just got dove in because I really like to be helpful and, you know, and be proactive, right? So I kind of stood out in a sense of not overly, but, you know, just kind of like, oh, wow, she's really on it, you know. And from there, I started my own practice in Portland, Oregon. And here I am saying natural medicine, anyone in Portland, Oregon. It was pretty saturated. And thankfully, again, I kept running into my mentor who was like, would you like to join us? We're building this center focused on this condition. And so the acronym is SIBO. So we're building this SIBO center. I said, absolutely, because I was already doing this in my private practice. So I got an opportunity to be around the top minds in this field around the world, even the researchers here in Los Angeles, which is why I ended up here, because we were having this casual conversation. I was flying down fairly often, like maybe every other week or so, and I was considering having a practice where I would be flying from both places. And one of them said, why don't you just move here? We really need you, because quite a few people may have read a book or gone to a weekend seminar, but they don't know it the way that you know it, and you're in it. And it just so happened when I got to the airport that day, my lease renewal came up.
Oh.
And then I returned to Portland and it was pouring down sheets of rain. And I was like, maybe I should consider that. And next thing you know, I was moved in 2 weeks. Like it was like, boom, it happened. And so to have more of that closer access to the lead researchers, and they have since built an entire program of a facility, even studying the gut microbiome, and it's even more specific to the small intestines. A lot of people will think about the large intestine where our stool resides, but the small intestine was where the magic happens. That's where we absorb everything. That's where our neurotransmitters, or that brain gut connection and your mood, etc. And so they're doing a lot of great, amazing research, even anti-aging. I mean, there's so much knowledge we can get from that small intestine. So that's the exciting part, that I get to have access to their, what I call research, right? So we have very, very strict parameters around research, and we need that. I need to be able to read a study and say, okay, in the majority of people, this is the outcome. And I also need to, I call that the zoom out, but then I also need to be able to zoom in to the microscopic N of one, and this one person in front of me who might be very unique, or like I say on a commercial, you hear side effects may include,
Right.
and there's that list, that might be that N of one. And I'm the 4-year-old that goes, but why?
Right.
Why is that different for these people versus the other number of people that took this exact same drug? So I find that fascinating. So we work really nicely together in terms of, they have the big picture, and then I can zoom in on some of these more challenging cases. And I've had people who have come from all around the world, seeing the best experts in their field. And it really does take that unique listening and quite frankly, intuition to hear and decipher more of what's unique about that person.
Wow, that's just amazing. And I love how you took something that was so personal and and took that as your calling to help others, with either similar problems or even worse problems. Now, in terms of how you started your own I guess practice and moving to LA, how is that transition?
Oh, the practice transition, it was a little different in the sense of even business entity setup, right? There are certain laws and regulations. I started out from the beginning, quite frankly, even in medical school, because I was a non-traditional student, knowing that I was going to be a cash practice. I wasn't going to play the insurance game. Nothing, we all need each other, but I just was not going to chase the money. The money was going to come to me, if not prepaid. People prepay for their appointments. People pay for a consult with me, so it's very different. So I think that's maybe the difference. You have to find the audience that actually is seeking that, because I understand even with myself, I have this insurance. I should be able to get X amount of care, if not really, we hope that it is preventative care, right? But really what you find out in the conventional model is that it's not so much a preventative care unless you have a certain coverage. So, so I have both, right? But I also know that the value that I have in prevention versus cure is, it does take an investment.
Yeah, smart from the business perspective. And being in Los Angeles, I feel like there's a lot of people are very affluent, and the affluent people tend to go after natural remedies, and they don't have a problem paying for it, so I personally had an issue when I was pregnant with my second daughter, my migraines, my hemiplegic migraines were awful. And every doctor that I went to basically prescribed me medicine while I was a month pregnant. I'm like, what are you thinking? You think I'm going to take this medication? And I ended up going to a doctor that, I mean, she upfront back then, this is like 15 years ago, charged me about $700 to see me. And a lot of it was energy. She just, with her hand, literally went like this. And she was like, you need this vitamin in your body. You need to stop eating gluten. You need to do like, it was the most miraculous thing I've ever, I had ever experienced. And all I did was change my diet, follow what she told me to do, take the vitamins that she told me to do, and my headache was gone. It was incredible. I have never experienced anything like it. So I do want to dive in a little bit more about the high 70 channeling session. Just tell us a little bit about all these different amazing, I guess, ways that people can work with you.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm like whoosh, feeling that all over. Because yeah, while I was very, and I still am very science and evidence based, I find, and even as I work through my epigenetics with my weight, it's kind of it's been a journey, right? But what I noticed the most is energy. And I've literally even documented this on the scale of like getting bad news, and I'm talking pretty shake your world kind of news, right? Where yes, we hear this cortisol, this stress hormone, but it's like I've watched it just affect my body significant, like say on the scale, and I'd say I would love to even show somebody else to go, look, I am not eating different. I am not, I'm not being sedentary, et cetera, et cetera. But ever since I got this information about my family, that might change everything. You know what I'm saying? That being unstable, look at my weight. I was like, who's going to believe me? What weight loss clinic could I even go to? Or, just any of these things. And thank you for sharing about migraines, because I suffered from migraines so much so that I did not, there was a time I was like, just turn the lights out for me. I'm done. Like this, I can't take it anymore. And so I can relate to having to kind of figure a lot of things out on my own as well. And not necessarily feeling heard, right? They say, give you another drug and that drug makes you worse and such. So I can't imagine if you were pregnant, knowing how these drugs can affect our liver and such. So what happened was, even with my other abilities in terms of my intuition, I was kind of had to hide it. But I had a music producer actually who came forward and was just like, we were working with their health and had gotten such significant results. And then they were like, well, what am I going to do? And I said, well, in terms of like, they kind of thought they were done and we'll see you later. But I was like, well, life can happen. For example, I lost the love of my life just suddenly. And you just don't know how that's going to affect your business life and your health. And let me tell you, I learned. And you don't know how your body's going to respond to grief. I learned that. That is a profound, interesting thing in and of itself. And by way of us talking through that, I was able to share how, because of my grief, one of my patients, who I didn't know this, was a medium, is a medium. And I was having this day where the plates were spinning, right? It was intense. And I just said, I'm going to sit down to meditate. Came flooding in, and I just couldn't even. I'm doing this for the sake of my health. And then all of a sudden she pops up with this text saying, it's not an emergency. I'm okay. But you don't know this about me. I happen to be a medium, and I have some messages for you. And I'm very open to that. And I just said, okay. And I watched those 3 little dots, right? Those text dots for quite a long time. And then they just came flooding in, so much so that as I was sitting there in my meditated position, I was looking at these tulips. I had just been at the store deciding between tulips and roses. And I literally felt something tell me to buy the tulips, and so one of the texts that came through was, thank you for buying the tulips. And I was just like, okay, wait a minute. Like, you got it. Okay. But it was also that don't question it, because I knew he was speaking to me.
Yeah.
There were things that were moving, like a candle that was sitting on the edge of a, where you go, oh, move that, that's going to fall off the table. And then I'd come back and boom, it was still right on that edge of the table. And I'd be like, nobody's going to think I'm a doctor. Like, what's going on here? But at the same time, I had these gifts when I was a child. My mom says that I saw spirits when I was very young. I was not afraid.
Wow.
And I had things happen in med school. We had multiple people pass. And I would be like, so-and-so came to talk to me. At least I could tell my parents this, right? And I
Right.
didn't really think anything of it until it happened to myself. And then as I'm doing this, and as this music producer is like, well, I got to come back. I got to, like my gut is better, but I got to come see you. And it was like this underground, shh, we don't talk about it. I had a set fee and it was, it was pretty high. And he then started sending me all these people in the industry. And I just loved it. It was just so much fun to help them from which label they should sign, when they should release their song. I mean, all kinds of really great, fun things. But the depth of it was that I was still in a state of grief. And I also was in this state of maybe to say, oh, look at these fun gifts that I can share with people, but really what's my intention?
Right.
And where is my ego? Because I'd always even talk to people, I'm like, this isn't coming from Melanie. This is being kind of channeled through me to you. It's not my opinion. And it's only what I see your soul or your energy is projecting in this moment in time. It's not to say that that can't change. So if
Right.
I'm watching your movie trailer right now, I go, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But if you decide to change the script, then of course that's going to, right? We have all these parallel universes of how these outcomes could come. And at least that's why I was keeping it a smaller group for people who really understood that, because then it helped them navigate and learn their own intuition.
Mhm.
And then what touched me was last year, I find this energy channel. She's so young and she's so wise. And I was like, this is how I've kind of felt growing up. I was like, I feel like I was the wise one, the wise young one. And she's an energy channel. And ever since learning that, really more so for myself. So I was attuned for my own healing, which was significant. And then I'm attuned so that I can send it to others. And as you mentioned, I have quite a few testimonials where, people are just like, and that's their experience. That's not me asking, that's their enthusiasm. And even I had to look at it and say, wow, there clearly is something to this. And I will say, you have your energy enthusiasts. And then I even try, I've had some of my colleagues who, might not have been as woo about it, but they were like, wow, my heart rate variability is different.
Right.
Wow, my blood sugar is better. And then what happened for me was we go from being pretty inside to all of a sudden I had a few conferences to go to. And it was a lot of walking at this one huge conference. And so I had, if anyone's ever heard of plantar fasciitis, it's where the bottom of your feet can become extremely painful to walk. It might start on your heels. And it's like, I'd heard it, my mom had had it. If you don't know until you know. And it is intense. I mean, it's that, oh my goodness, how am I going to walk anywhere to the bathroom, let alone to New York City, which was my next trip. And so here I was, and I even diagnosed myself. Plantar fasciitis is usually 6 to 8 weeks. I was even I was ready to order my scooter because I literally did not know how I was going to walk to get on the airplane. And then all of a sudden I had this like, wait a minute, all these people who have had these amazing results. Now, mind you, I've been channeling the energy daily for myself and getting profound. I mean, even when I look at the calendar and see what has happened since I started doing this work, you wouldn't have been able to tell me a year ago to say, oh, this is what you'll be doing a year from now. I would have said, no, that's not possible. And so here I was going, okay, let me just try this on my feet. Let me concentrate the energy and really do this for this in purpose. Because I was thinking I was having maybe some more psychosomatic, like, why don't I want to move forward type of energy? But I really concentrated on the physical aspect. And I couldn't believe it. In fact, I even had the cynical, oh, that's just placebo effect. Because I got up from my meditation to get some water. And it was that like, okay, you had to like prep yourself to even get up, and how's this first step going to be? It was already 50% better. So I was kind of like, whoa. and again, I was like, nah, placebo. And then it was the next morning, because it's usually worse in the morning, where I was just walking to the bathroom, like nothing, just not even thinking about it. I get about halfway there. That's when I literally did the urge, stop, look down at my feet and went, wait a minute, you've got to be kidding me. And from there, of course, it depends on my activity. I'm not going to say it's like completely resolved. I wanted to say, but it was like, I went from, I don't know how I'm going to walk through and do a conference to at least I could even do little mini session. And it wasn't, it was 90% better. We're talking, I have to do some be very, very active, and maybe I'll get a little, right. And again, I can do another session. If not, I can do a session while I'm in the activity, because I want to prevent it. I'll be like, okay, feet, okay, I like,
Yes.
let's get this energy through. And so that was my eye opener. A significant one. Those who have experienced plantar fasciitis, you want to do but just about anything.
Right.
And so I'm not saying I can reproduce those results, but that's at least what happened for me. And that was enough for me to go, okay, there's definitely something to this energy work, as other people are claiming it is.
When my mom got COVID last year or early last year, she's in her 70s. I kept telling her, open your internal pharmacy. I just kept telling her, envision how you're healing yourself. And although I don't know much about energy healing and channeling energy, but I swear, and until this day, she tells me, she's like, I think I mentally healed myself. And what's your thought on that when people get sick and they just mentally start telling themselves that they're going to get better and they're going to, whether it's cancer or whatever it is, they envision it breaking it down into pieces? And does that, what's the connection between our mental, our thoughts, and then that draws the energy? And I don't know, I'm shocked that there's, I don't know, is there science behind it to prove how it all affects?
It's an excellent question, and definitely an area that I nerd out in. And so what I can say is that I think that phenomenon is under, I don't know how much investigation. Do you know what I mean? I think it's really chalked up to, not to say miracles, but, oh, interesting, right? That like even the documentary, The Secret, has really great examples, right? And I think that that empowers people just to even know, because otherwise, how would they have maybe gotten exposed to that? So I appreciate what your mom is saying. In fact, I do that, have done that a lot. I've had a couple of moments where I was just like, you know what, I know I can make a difference with this in my thoughts. What I do know, however, is a documentary that you might enjoy. It's called Superhuman. And if you're familiar with the History Channel, has a show that's been on for over 10 seasons called Ancient Aliens. One of the frequent commentators on there, she did this documentary. And so what I found interesting is she does energy work, is the point. And she's at Stanford in a research lab where they were watching her channel energy to water. And they said, okay, if the pH changes in the water, that would be significant. Even the slightest bit. They were like looking at it by the 10th of a point. And she shifted, the energy that she channeled shifted the pH of the water significantly, like a few points. Then they went to DNA, and they had samples of DNA, and they said, look, if this changes the DNA, like at all, like even again, they were getting down to these very, very scientific, like we're looking at a snail move, right? Like these little details. And again, the energy was able to significantly change this DNA. And so in my mind, I think we're just on the cusp of this energy. I think we're on, this is going to be the age of Aquarius, in the sense of, this is not just woo woo. This is reality. And, I'll say, if somebody's really skeptical, and I don't blame that, it's not a negative, but I'll say, are you aware of the sun? Do you believe you receive energy from the sun?
Yeah.
Right. And the sun is a star.
Right. We get vitamin D.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right.
There you go. Or I'll say, I am 98.6 degrees of energy. Isn't that like an average temperature? But if my body is no longer here, what happens to that energy? Because energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? So that 98 degrees of energy of anyone who leaves this earth, right? It still exists like that. Yeah. And so that can get into soul, that can get into many different ways of interpreting it. But I think that there is this lens and a lot of things that we can't see that we're going to start being able to see. And the more people that have these experiences and speak about them, or even share with their doctor, I believe, because they'll say, well, what happened with your liver enzymes?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the power of thought.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. I think the superhuman, I think I've seen it on Amazon Prime. I've seen it. Because when you described how they did the DNA test, I remember watching that show, but it was probably a year ago. The micro meditations, tell me a little bit about that. How does that work?
Yeah, that actually came from Ancient Aliens with my music producer friend. We saw an episode about frequency and these historic ancient, places they're finding. And it was about this setting it to a certain frequency. And so binaural beats are different frequencies in each ear that can actually help train the brain, not train, but get the brain into a more zen or peaceful state in a faster way, right? We can set frequencies to just think of a song that makes you want to get up and dance versus a song that makes you want to kind of cry, right? So we can set the frequency with the intention to say, look, I'd really like to, what I say to my massage therapist, take me away and then bring me back again. Because I don't want to be like, I got to get through the rest. I got to get off this table, right? I want to just fall off the table and go to bed. I need to function. So that's what I liked about, I really like about what he developed. And then I did a guided on top of it. So we have an unguided and a guided. So I like to do my unguided. It's 20 minutes, right? So for example, those who do Pomodoro or whatever, I might just put that in and maybe I'm writing my to-do list or I'm journaling or thinking through projects, right? And it can just really help me get focused. And then I even have a shorter version that's 3 minutes. Maybe I listen to that before I'm talking to my accountants, right? To just get me in to the right vibe of okay, they're the expert, I'm not, right? And accepting that. So yeah, it's really it really helped me when I was in that, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, but my brain just went on overdrive. And as many times as I would attempt to quiet my mind, having a sound of any form. So this is not necessarily white noise. It's, it has sounds attached to it. And then the guided can really help because sometimes people really can fall into, it's got to be the right voice and the right thing, but it can just really help them tune out other thoughts because they can tune into that voice or just that sound. I know that can help for me. Some guided meditations are just beautiful and I get very, very deep into it. Whereas if I had done that same amount of time by myself, I might not have gotten as good of a deep outcome. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So before we started our interview, I brought up CBD a little bit. How do you think CBD plays a role in all of this? Especially health.
In gut health?
Yeah.
Well, CBD was definitely, especially when I was working with patients with abdominal pain, that can be very significant. And we're talking people who have been in and out of emergency rooms and they're even turned away and such. And I can't imagine how that feels. So CBD is really what I turn to the most in those situations. And of course, I have access to professional grade options, I'm going to say at the time. And also it depends on the state where you reside. In Oregon, I had more prescribing rights and could talk about this more freely and dose it. Whereas in California, I can educate, but I can't tell people exactly what to do.
Right.
So I would always start off with a high dose. This is me. This is my clinical experience. I'm not recommending this. This was before we have more information, I would say, let's get the highest quality product that we can find at the highest dose, and then use either the lowest amount of that or titrate up from that the low dose of a high concentration. So if it's 1,000 milligram bottle, I'd say, okay, versus a 500 milligram bottle, I'd rather them purchase the 1,000 milligram bottle and take less of it, right? Or find out how much they need of it so we can find their absorption rate and their dosing. And what's nice now is that there's actually epigenetic reports that you can get where you can hone that in a bit more, narrow it down, right? In terms of, because there's other things also. I've noticed some companies that will use olive oil or coconut oil. So there's other things you want to maybe factor in there, right? Like there are good quality. I think I've even noticed yours has a hemp oil, and that's impressive, right? There's multiple things that you can look at because that can definitely affect how your response to it, right? You could say, well, that didn't do anything. And I've been there. I get plenty of samples, lots of samples. And I'm like, this just tastes like olive oil with peppermint in it, or like I really, and I've even wondered if I respond to CBD because of I don't know what I'm getting, right? Versus even recently finding this DNA report that I can say, okay, this is more specific. This is the ratio. Now that does depend if we're talking about CBD only, sometimes the ratio, some people do need a little THC for those who are in states or legal that they can acquire it. But more so, I just put this on CBD only out of curiosity. And what I liked about it was the brand that came up was the same, like it was like 100% match for cognition, for anxiety, for different areas. So I think that can be helpful because you also want to get a formula that's consistent. And you also want to know that if indeed it's a relief or a relax formula, right? Sometimes that can be energizing in certain people, for example. And other times it's not as relieving as it should be, or it's a dosing amount, right? So again, it can be more information that people can glean to say, oh, look, I'm a slow metabolizer of CBD. It's probably going to be a higher dose before I feel it versus giving up, because they only bought the 30 milligram bottle and they had no idea that they needed the 1,500. And even just the smallest amount of that 1,500 is like the sweet spot. And like, if we both know that, if I'm talking about my feet or my head, if we both know about having migraines, anything that touches that, I know you did it in a different way, but it has helped me significantly. I was the one going to the neurologist telling them what I had access to in college at the time, which was cannabis. I was like, and my parents and everybody knew, I was like, this is the only thing that helps me. I don't want to live, quite frankly. And what you're giving me makes me feel worse. And for some reason, this can at least lift. And I think you understand like that vascular pressure, it's like there was something that just would release, and someday that will be a medicine available to you, and because it was a big thing for me to even say it. And it wasn't like I was it was very medicinal to me at that time. And so just to even have somebody hear that. So from this state, I'm able to, because not everybody's comfortable with that, or it's at least here's something you can have access to. Here's something that's non-psychoactive. If anyone has maybe they have a family history of mental health that is not conducive to ever trying THC, nor should they, right? So CBD is such a great opportunity, and it's affecting the system on so many levels. They're finding receptors, right? It's pretty much, if you name it, they're saying, yep, there's the endocannabinoid system that's really that's involved there. So that's my take on it. I've always, especially for pain, and again, I'm looking at extreme conditions here in the sense of what has it really helped. And I've had, again, this one case I can think of where it was like CBD was their godsend. They also did not want to live much longer with, especially being turned away from an emergency room, right? They're like, well, where else can I turn? Nobody, like this is excruciating. And the CBD was the only thing that touched it, right? And especially if you're attempting to avoid opioids, right? So we want to get somebody in pain relief, but at the same time, what's the risk ratio, right? So they were so grateful because it was at the point where they definitely were eligible for opioid medication.
Wow.
Yet at the same time, to get the relief from the CBD, even the prescribing opioid was like, oh, hang on a second, I have to acknowledge this case.
Yeah. Yeah, and opioids are addicting where CBD is not. And that's what a lot of people are shocked to hear. They're like, how can it not be addicting? I'm like, it's not. Just try it and you'll see. Your body doesn't need it. Once I take it now that I'm not nursing. I just had a baby 4 months ago. I am taking it every morning just to like a supplement to be healthy. But I used to take a lot more when I had my migraine attacks. And if I didn't take it daily, there was no need for me. And I love that, like even a glass of wine, you drink it one night, 2 nights, and then the third night, your body almost wants it. It's so interesting how our body gets used to certain things. And so that's one thing that I love about CBD. And like you mentioned, it has all these receptors. And one thing that I love about CBD is that it's sending messages to the brain to produce more cannabinoids, which our bodies already do, right? So now in terms of consistency, the reason why I started Roma Leaf was because of the problem that I saw in the marketplace, where a lot of brands were not consistent. And I'm talking about some of the best brands out there. Every bottle wasn't consistent, and my hemiplegic migraines cause numbness in my body, which can lead to a stroke. And the reason why CBD helps is it helps prevent the numbness, and then therefore I have a less of a chance to get the stroke. And so if the dosage wasn't right, then it wouldn't really do the job. And my struggle was that every bottle I would purchase was inconsistent. And right when I thought I figured out the dosage, the next bottle wasn't the same. It wasn't working the same. And I got so sick and tired of that, and to have to risk my life and risk the fact that I could get a stroke, which my doctors for 20 years told me. They said, you need to be on Elavil and you need to take it daily, which is a vegetable drug, by the way. And I refused. So it was very risky for me not to be on medication. And then finally, when I found the solution through CBD, I couldn't trust it fully. And so long story short, I started Roma Leaf because I wanted to control the potency, make sure that the potency was consistent in every bottle. And also I didn't want THC so that I could handle my day-to-day job and do what I do, manage the kids and everything else. So I'm glad you brought up the consistency, because that's a huge problem right now, mainly because it's not a regulated, there is no regulation still. People are making it however they want to make it, and nobody's really going in and testing everything. Yeah. And I always tell people, just go, if you are going to look for the best brand, make sure they're focusing on consistency and the potency is consistent in every bottle. Because a lot of times, and I've done this myself, I actually took a brand and lab tested where they said they had 1,500 milligrams of CBD, and in reality, there was 700 milligrams of CBD. So,
oh, it's rampant. I mean, that's where I'm so impressed with your product. And quite frankly, it would be like on the front, like consistency, right? Like that is so important. And that jumped out at me in your marketing, because it's like, that is crucial. And you have such a great personal story to attach that to, right? This isn't, you think, I mean, I'm a Virgo sun sign, it's like, I feel like, like there's like certain standard, right? And I just go, oh, she ticks all of my standards in this. And so if I recommend something, my friends will go, oh, if it's Melanie approved, right? And so that's what your intention is. You're just like, hey, look, just be mindful, because you're right. It is very shocking where people, not to say they cut corners, but like you say, if it's unregulated, why not? They might not, it might not be on the forefront of their mind. And so to me, that's just the key. And to be like the leader in that, to be able to say, look, from the beginning, this is consistently what you're going to get. I think that's impressive.
Thank you, Dr. Melanie. That means a lot to me coming from you. And I think what the other thing that bothers me is I can never find the owners of the brand a lot of times. And that also makes me stop and say, can I trust this brand? Because if I don't know if who's really behind it, then I'm like, if you're going to be scared to put yourself out there, then you're probably not making the best product, you know? And so,
Oh yeah, as an investor, right? We know, and it's not hard to find out. And you know, there's the people who are going to be passionate. I just actually fingers crossed going to be consulting for a cannabis company here soon. And it's that just being on the same wavelength and having the same ethics, and you know, just really seeing that camaraderie of going, okay, I know this is different, or you're not just here for the profit margin, you know, you're really here to produce and help us produce something that's going to be the leader, not for ego's sake, but for like to show and pave the way to say this can be the healthy right way to do this, right? Because a lot of like say edibles and such, they're just loaded with sugar and they're loaded with other right, versus getting something. That's another thing I was impressed with, is that the hemp oil that you use.
yes.
That's another really important point that I'm sure you can taste the difference, but I'm sure it's the delivery that makes it not much better too, absorption. So
You said it, because hemp
yeah.
seed oil, I mean, our CBD is derived from hemp, the hemp plant. So when we were formulating it, I challenged my formulators and I said, well, why do I have to use coconut oil or olive oil? Like, that's all fat, and some people don't absorb that easily. And so, yeah, and all of our ingredients are super simple, and we keep the hemp seed oil as the base oil, which in my opinion works really well with the CBD. Wow, I love your feedback on CBD, and I can't believe our interview is almost over. I mean, I have still so many questions for you, but we have to sadly conclude, and hopefully I'll have you back again. But where can the listeners learn more about you, get in touch with you, and God, if they have health problems and they need you to help them, how can they contact you?
Sure. Well, my website is intuitiveedgedoctor.com. That's where you'll see everything that I do. And also for gut specific, SIBOsolution.com is another website that I have. And then also on Instagram, people can reach me at Dr. Melanie _ND.
Amazing. And we'll have all this information in our show notes as well. But Dr. Melanie, it's been a pleasure having you. I can't wait to have you back again. I want to dive a lot more into energy healing and all that amazing stuff that's so magical. And in my opinion, it's going to be the future of medicine. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.